This is Wheel Bearings. I'm Dan Roth from Forbes.
I'm Sam Abu-Al-Samad from Navigant Research.
And I'm Rebecca Lindland from Rebecca Drives.
And of course, you can find us all on car review tweets as well. I've seen all of us have been posting some stuff. Every now and then I'll check the account and I'm like, oh, we posted.
There's new stuff, yeah.
So that's good. It just seems that people like the sort of short snackable format. So that's good.
The opposite of what this show is.
Yes, absolutely. Well, we'll keep it tight. So let's move on.
We consider this a gourmet meal. So you have your snacks when on car review tweets, and Wheel Bearings is the gourmet meal.
The gourmet, and
we have the 12 course. I
was going to say we have courses.
Italian meal that runs into the 2:00 in the morning.
And now that we're at Christmas, this is well, maybe not quite the 7 fishes yet. That'll be after New Year's. But anyway, let's move on to the appetizer course. Sam, we'll just jump into your cars because they're the top of the list. You're driving the 2020 Volvo V60 Cross Country.
Yeah, since we last recorded, I've had a couple different cars. I spent a week with the V60 Cross Country, and my faith in station wagons is definitely reaffirmed after driving that thing. I still love station wagons, even if they are sitting too high. But I'm still a big fan of wagons, and particularly the V60. I like the S90, but for me personally, it's a little bigger than I would prefer. Unless I was like back in my high school days when we had to haul around engines in the back of my shop teacher's 71 Dodge Monaco wagon. No, he had a 71 Monaco wagon. I mean, that thing was ginormous, had about 16 feet of rear overhang. You could fit a Hemi in the back of it. And we regularly use that for runs to the scrapyard to pick up parts for the cars we were working on. But
it's the fact that you had a shop teacher and you had shop class and you would work on cars. None of that exists anymore.
I know it is truly tragic that it's almost impossible to find an auto mechanics class in a high school anymore. I'm a huge supporter of education. I think it's enormous. Public education is enormously crucial to the health of our society. But the reality is not everybody needs to go to college. There's a lot of things in society, a lot of jobs that need to be done that don't require a university education, but do require education. And I think it's tragic that we don't have enough vocational education in this country. And a lot of it is available like through community colleges and stuff. And I think, a lot of people that, are looking, that want to get good jobs should really be looking to community colleges for, things like mechanics, plumbing, electricians, all
HVAC.
There's an enormous number of jobs that cannot realistically be automated.
Dryer repair people
can be that can be good, well-paying jobs. That you make a decent living at. Not everybody needs to be a Silicon Valley billionaire, or a coder. We don't need to have an entire country of coders. We don't need 300 million coders. But we need people to fix stuff. And
the thing that I've realized, and that I wish I had, in some ways, I wish I had gone into a trade earlier, was those rich people, those Silicon Valley tech bros, they're completely useless when it comes to like holding a screwdriver or using a wrench.
Yeah.
And when their giant mansions have, a problem, who do they call? They call the blue collar guys.
That's right.
And have you seen what plumbers drive lately? Like, pretty nice cars, like Raptors.
Yeah.
and like some of it is like you can write off the business expense, and I get that too. But really, really good trade folks are, they are the heart of the nation.
Yep.
And I got us off track, so I'll get us back on track.
So much for a nice tight show.
Well, we haven't done one for 2 weeks, so I think it's worth a tangent or two.
Absolutely.
Sam's got it all bottled up. The V60 it's a good wagon.
Yeah, the V60 cross country. You take the V60, you jack it up an inch and a half, something like that. Put some cladding on the wheel arches. And make it sort of semi-pseudo SUV like a Subaru Outback. But it's still a Volvo V60, and that makes it genuinely a lovely car to spend time in.
It is very posh. You can't really get an engine in there unless it's like a 12A rotary or something.
Yeah.
One of the things, one of the things that I like about wagons as well is, first of all, they're so easy to get in and out of, and they still give you a lot of cargo space. They still, and I know you don't like how high they are starting to ride, but I think there's such a good balance between that SUV, of which some of those H points are like at my chin, and just being able to load and unload quickly, easily. Get it, let your dog can get into it. Your
get
kids.
your groceries in and out. Get your dog in and out.
And then access to the roof as well. That's
absolutely.
I remember on the Buick Regal Tour X launch, that was one of the things that they commented on, was that the vehicle was actually, it was so much, there was a lot of utility there because you could easily access the roof as well.
Yeah, our last two family cars before the Civic that we have now were both Volkswagen station wagons. We had a Passat wagon, a 2000 Passat wagon, and then a 2010 Jetta wagon. And they were lovely cars. It's the beauty of it is you get the driving dynamics of a car. It feels like driving a car, but you have this big extra space in the back and a big opening in the back to put stuff in, so if you like to go to, estate sales, or, if you want to go camping, or, go skiing for a weekend, you're not playing Tetris trying to get your stuff into the trunk of a car, or trying to heave it up into the back of a Suburban or something, which we'll talk about later. It's really easy to use. And, I guess, the extra, inch or two of ride height that you get in something like the V60 cross country, gets you, does make it, a little easier to slide in and out. The H point is a little bit higher, but not so high that you don't need, big running boards and a handle on the A-pillar to grab onto to heave yourself up into the seat. You just sit down in it, and it's very comfortable. And as we've talked about on numerous occasions before, Volvos, aside from the Sensus infotainment system, are a genuinely wonderful place to spend time. They have very comfortable seats. They're supportive. The materials it looks great. Everything feels really good. And it's a premium car, so all that stuff should be true, and it is. And it has this one had the Bowers and Wilkins premium audio system, which sounds great.
That one's pretty good. Yeah.
So it's not an inexpensive car, but when you look at it against its competitive set, cars like the Audi A6, or I guess probably the A4, BMW,
the Allroad?
3 Series Touring.
Would you go with the Audi Allroad on the V6?
The Allroads, the various Allroad models. If you compare it to that competitive set, it's reasonably priced. It's not outrageously priced. The base price for the V60 cross country, this is the T5, so it's the turbocharged 2-liter, 250 horsepower. You can also get the T6 that adds a supercharger and gets you over 300 horsepower. But the base price is $45,000. The one I drove was pretty much loaded with at $57,000, just shy of $57,000, including destination charge. It had a lovely metallic paint finish on it, a white finish.
Did it have the brown trim?
The brown interior trim?
No, I'm sorry. So the last one I drove sort of had it was like a white metallic.
Oh, the cladding, you mean?
And then it had brown accents on the exterior.
Yeah, it did have that.
And man, is that a good looking car.
It is. It's a fantastic looking car. And I think I would personally say I think the V60 is probably the best looking car Volvo makes right now. I think it has fantastic proportions. And
I love that XC40 though. It's so cute.
Oh yeah, the XC40 is adorable.
But the V60, is more elegant. It's beautiful. I think it's a beautiful car. Yes, the XC40 is cute.
Yeah, no, it is.
But the V60, just has that elegance to it. And with the current Volvo design language, it all just works really well with that shape of that car.
I really like the detailing on that design. If you look, it's not just. It looks like they put a lot of thought into it. Even around the rear, so where the rear quarter panels transition into the back of the car, there's a chamfer around the whole back of the car.
Yep.
it's one of those like little things that you just notice and you just kind of look at it like, huh, they actually went out of their way to do that.
Yeah.
I drove
style
that.
is a real priority
I drove
with
it
Volvo.
this summer, and I remember, I have issues with some of the Volvo transmission, right? Like there was just something I didn't love the way that it shifted, but the last two that I've had, I haven't had that same feeling from. So I don't know if I'm just getting used to it or if they're just a little bit of an adjustment there, but I'm becoming more of a fan because I didn't love it at first. I remember
Maybe you got one that was abused by the press. And
abused by the press.
No, that never happens.
What are you talking about? Shut your mouth.
So I agree with you, Sam. I really like the V60. I think is a really great offering from Volvo. I think it's the middle of their range. It does all of the things that the big ones do. It's a tidy size. It's easy to drive,
and it's a better size, I think, than the last generation V60, which for its segment really had a very cramped back seat. It was on the small size, and this one I think is just right.
This one, yeah, it's a little better, but you still like. So Volvo, and like I don't mind the ride height because it's kind of putting the Volvo wagon back where the Volvo wagon was. My 240 was. It had a lot of ride height, man. there was a lot of space between the wheel and the top of the fender. So like even as the pseudo SUV thing, it's just kind of sort of bringing them back up to where they had been to a degree. They're not really super high, and you don't really pay for it dynamically. So it's still really good to drive.
And there is an off-road mode on this one that actually does lift it up a little bit higher. Not that you would ever really take a car like this off-road, but I guess
not on purpose.
Yeah. But there's different drive modes, so there's the comfort mode and the normal mode and the off-road mode. But
I was just disappointed by the cargo space behind it, like in the actual cargo area. It's good, but it's not as good. I don't think. Maybe it's just my perception, but I think that the Jetta wagon is actually larger. In overall cargo space,
it may be. I think it may be a combination of the cargo cover that they have on there, and then there's a fair bit of intrusion from the sides, for the wheel wells, because I think there's stuff, electronics and stuff stored in there, and the subwoofer, things like that.
Yeah.
I think it's a good size, and the beauty of a wagon is, if you do need to carry larger stuff, you can pop those back seats down, and you actually have a really large space back there. With typically a flat load floor like this one has. So I think it, it can work out really well.
Yeah, I mean, it's more wagony than anything. I want more wagon options because there aren't as many. It competes with, what does it compete with? There's the Subarus, but they're sort of like a price class down, right?
Right.
And there's Mercedes, but they're a price class up. And there's Audi.
And Volkswagen, which is more in the Subaru price class. They still have the All-Track, although I think that may be going.
So wait, Sam.
The standard sport wagon, VW sport wagon, is going away, but I think the All-Track is sticking around.
So Sam, I found the sticker from when I had the Volvo T5 all-wheel drive cross country. Is that different? Is that what you had as well?
That's the same thing, yeah.
So that one, and I apologize, I was looking back at my schedule. I actually had it more recently, and I don't think I've talked about it on the show because I had a much better experience with it than I did with Volvos that I've had. And so maybe the earlier ones, as we talked about, were a little bit more abused. So that was, I think I actually had to drive it in some bad weather, and it was really sure-footed. Like it was, I didn't miss the height of the SUV. Like I felt like I was actually almost more secure because it was a little bit cold, it was a little bit slippery. I was driving to the airport, and it actually was really, really well behaved, and it was so nice looking on the road. You know what? I think I had it after. I don't think I've been on the show since I've had it, so I apologize. I got my dates mixed up, but it's a really good car.
If you're gonna mix up dates, this is the best way to do it. I thought you.
Wait, I thought we went.
And this thing, I think all of us really like them.
Yeah, and this thing's got a lot of this particular one had a lot of nice features in it, like the the Cross Country Pro package, which gives you 4-zone climate control, 4-way power lumbar for both front seats, not just for the driver's seat. The 19-inch wheels,
and I thought the safety features were not very intrusive either. Like they were well done.
Yeah,
the feedback was appropriate.
And pilot assist has gotten progressively better over the last several years since the first time I drove it when the XC90 was new. I guess 3-4 years ago. I tried pilot assist then and was very unimpressed with it. And it has gotten progressively better over the last several years. Each year they update the control, and it's still not. It does some degree of lane centering. On a highway curve, at 70 miles an hour, it's often not necessarily going to stay in the lane, so you do have to keep your hands on the wheel. But it does a nice subtle job of keeping the car centered in the lane most of the time. So it's not driving itself, but it's definitely doing a good job of assisting.
Yes. So you know what? I'm looking back now, and I tried the different drive modes, and I found comfort to be the best one. Eco, I wrote that the calibration was unpleasant and shifting gears unexpectedly and unevenly. So I didn't stay in eco mode for long at all because it just wasn't a pleasant driving experience.
It was probably short shifting prematurely, trying to keep the engine revs down as low as possible.
Okay.
Things like
and then
that.
The dynamic mode, it increased the revs and tightened the steering, but it wasn't a significant difference. And I actually I had the off-road, and it's just for rough roads, it says, but I would have rather had a snow and mud mode.
Yeah, and that's something you find on a lot of newer vehicles now. As a snow and mud mode. When you get into deep snow, for the traction control, for example, you actually want the wheels to slip a little bit more when you get in deep snow or in sand or loose dirt, because you will get more traction if the traction control is too aggressive and tries to stop the wheels from spinning. You can easily end up getting stuck in those kinds of conditions, so that those deep surface kinds of modes can help you keep going and keep you from getting stuck in those conditions.
Okay. So, overall though, it was definitely, I liked it a lot, but then we also talked about visibility because the visibility was super narrow. So my brother Steve, who, believe it or not, is 6'3", so he and I were driving home, and
well, he got all the height. There was none left for you, right?
Everybody else in my family is 5'10" and above, and my two sisters are 5'9". But I am not bitter.
You know what? Small but mighty.
Yes, exactly. So
moving on. Sorry.
So one of the things that we noticed was that because the windows are so narrow, and the belt line is so high, the visibility was pretty compromised in it. And I felt like I needed to rely on blind spot monitoring more than in others. And I'll give you for instance. So, when you put if the window is down and you put your elbow on the top of the door, I could not, my forearm would not fit in that space. Like the window was so narrow.
Yeah, well, and I think that's a common problem with a lot of cars. We're starting to see that reverse a little bit, but they have shrunk the daylight openings, the windows, at the sort of the altar of style, and I think probably some side impact performance as well. The side impact thing is my theory,
sure.
But metal versus
that is definitely a part of it, but it's also a design trend. That kind of started in the early 2000s, maybe it was even the late 90s. One of the first cars that really did that was the first generation Audi TT. And, following that, a lot of other cars, a lot of designers started going in that high belt line direction. So, it's a mix of the two, the side impact and, just a design trend.
Right.
And both of those, they've started to figure out how to give the side impact protection, without needing such a high belt line. And so on some newer vehicles, we have started to see the belt line start to drop down again, which is a good thing. The Escape is a very prominent example.
So my brother Steve is shorter torsoed, very long legged, and he felt a little bit cramped in it, he said. He was aware of the roof. You know what I mean? And so I didn't know if you had felt that at all, Sam.
I'm kind of the opposite. I'm more long torso.
But you would feel it more then.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have an issue with the roof line.
Okay.
It was fine for me.
Yeah, because you're not dissimilar in size. To my.
Yeah, I'm like 5'11".
Yeah, so he's taller, but width wise, you're both like about the same size. And
okay.
But yeah, he definitely said that it just felt a little cramped for him. And you know what I said in my review was that it's not a barrier to purchase, but it's just something to be aware of on a test drive. Like if you're looking for a really open, a brighter sort of feel to a vehicle, I don't know that this gives it to you as much, because I do think those windows are pretty narrow.
I agree
right,
with that.
and this is a good reason why you should never, ever, 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 ever buy a car without test driving it first.
Yes.
Wow.
And when I say never, ever, I mean never. Don't, if you have not driven it, don't buy it.
Well, and, that's the most common advice I give to people when they want to talk about cars. It's like, what's great? What do you like? I'm like, what I like doesn't matter. You need to make a list and go drive the things you like, and the one that you like the best is the one you should buy.
Right, because everybody's got different tastes, but also everybody's bodies are a little bit different.
Yes.
Everybody's got slightly different proportions. Some people have longer arms or shorter arms, longer torsos or shorter torsos. And not every car is shaped the same way. So that's why I say it's really important to actually go drive it and make sure the car really fits you. Spend at least half an hour driving it around and make sure that you can see out of it, and that everything fits and feels reasonably comfortable and is easy to access for you. Because if it's not, what may seem like small annoyances at first will grow to be very large annoyances later on.
Exactly. So
especially if you've spent $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 on a car.
Let's do a podcast on car shopping tips.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have money,
right?
Well, there's
but
that.
It's
yes.
true, because it's an overwhelming experience. It's not positive. You've got to fight with the F&I guy coming up. Like there's a lot of negative feelings about something that should be a lot of fun and should be a fun process and exciting. And I think that, if we can provide a quick and easy guideline to things to keep in mind, just things to pay attention to, I think that would be a good and an interesting show.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
I agree. Let me write it down or I'll forget.
Exactly. Tell Google Assist.
Like a sieve. All right. So, yeah, tell Google Assist. Hey, let's see how many people say, "Hey Google."
Don't do that. I hate it when people do that on podcasts.
No, the commercials are doing it on Alexa now. Oh, wait, there's an Alexa.
But they're not supposed to do that either.
Alexa, quit.
Well, we've Alexa quit. You just fired off Alexa. So that's the cross country. But Sam, you're also driving the 2020 Hyundai Santa Fe, which this is the redesigned Santa Fe, right? That just looks fantastic on the road. Looks like an expensive German car.
Yeah, I actually drove the Santa Fe earlier this year as well. So this is the second time I've had it. And this is a vastly improved mid-size crossover compared to the previous generation. The previous generation wasn't terrible, but it wasn't. I thought I found it somewhat underwhelming. But this one is so much better. In every way. I mean, it's a good looking vehicle, and like the other Hyundais, this current generation of Hyundais, they have been kind of diverging them a little bit more. So that each model, there are some Hyundai specific design cues, like kind of the general shape of the grille, but they've been moving them apart more. So each one looks more distinct. So, this doesn't just look like a 3/4 scale version of the Palisade, and it doesn't look like a scaled up version of a Tucson. But, there are some things that, for example, on their SUVs, they're doing common. There's some commonality across the utilities, like from the Kona to the Santa Fe to the Palisade. You have, in the front, you have these slim LED driving lights and then sort of the blocky headlights down below, which is actually something that Jeep did kind of first, on
with the Cherokee,
with the Cherokee a few years back.
Yeah, but Hyundai has mastered it. Their stuff, they just look really good.
Yeah, it looks really sharp. And the interior of this thing, is really nice. Like other modern Hyundais, they've done a wonderful job on the cabin. It's much roomier than the previous generation was, especially in the back seat. So what we have now is the previous generation you had, the Santa Fe Sport was the 2-row, and then they had the Santa Fe was a sort of an undersized 3-row, longer but still undersized 3-row. This time for the Santa Fe, they've gone back to just having one variant of Santa Fe, which is a 2-row that's really roomy. And then for, if you want a 3-row, you step up to the Palisade, which is, proper 3-row, and you actually have room in that 3rd-row seat, for actual human beings and stuff, and they've done a really nice job on this interior. There are some hard plastic surfaces in there, but overall the stuff that you actually touch and interact with, is softer touch and has nice finishes on it. And there's some really nice detailing, like on the speaker grills on the doors. They've got this sort of diamond shaped prismatic pattern on there, so it's not just a flat speaker grill. It has some texture to it. And then the metal trim pieces across the dashboard and the top of the doors, has some texturing to it. So I think it's nice to look at, but it's also really nice to drive. The one I was driving has the 2.4 liter 4-cylinder.
So that's non-turbo, right? It's
a non-turbo, yeah. So it's like 190 horsepower, I think, or 188 horsepower. Which is, it's not an enormous amount of power, but it's more than adequate for pretty much any driving. You're not going to use this one, if you're going to be towing heavier trailers, but for just general commuting, it's a really nice option. It's not, and this thing is not huge, but it's very roomy, and the 8-speed automatic that Hyundai does is, a really smooth shifting unit. It's got their stop start system, which works really well, all-wheel drive, and Hyundai's driver assist features, their lane keeping assist and their adaptive cruise control work really well on this thing, and it's a full stop start or a full stop and go adaptive cruise control system, unlike the Honda Passport I drove last time, which, that's still an older style adaptive cruise control that cuts off when you get down to below 20 miles an hour. This one, in traffic, it'll bring you to a full stop and then resume again.
Yeah, well, we can talk about the Honda system when we get to my cars.
Yeah.
Well, moving on.
But yeah, so I mean, overall, aside from the engine, this was a limited, so this was pretty much loaded. It was all-wheel drive. Came in at $38,580, including the delivery charge. And it has, pretty much everything you want in there, including, wireless charging pad for your phone. The infotainment system, has Android Auto and Apple CarPlay support. And it's just, it's just a really nice commuter vehicle, if you want, something to haul your family or your friends, for 5 people in comfort, and, have lots of room for gear and stuff in the back.
So coincidentally, I actually had the Santa Fe Limited 2.0 with the 4-cylinder turbocharged. I had that, which has like a couple weeks ago,
a bunch of horsepower.
It does. And I had a similar experience in it where it was just it was just nice to drive. It was engaging. And I remember thinking, I feel like I own this car within a few hours of driving it, as opposed to other cars that, we have for a week. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I still don't understand this car, which I kind of experienced with the Acura MDX, which we can get to as well. But I just, and coincidentally, my cousin asked me about the Santa Fe because she's in the market. She's got one kid and he's a junior in high school. And so, he's very active and they've got a lot of stuff to haul around and stuff. And I just told her, I said, it's just a really nice vehicle. It comes, the one that I had, like Sam, it was fully loaded, 38,730 delivered. Mine was front wheel drive, so it did not have the all wheel drive capability. But I just remember it being friendly, like easy to use,
Yeah, there's no quirks to it.
Right.
It just works.
It just works.
That's because they're doing the work. They're doing the work to make the cars not just good for, project objectives or, to have something in the market. They're doing the work to make the cars good.
Exactly.
And it's just like, period.
And it just like you just get in it and you're like, I understand this car and it understands me. And I think also I did have the same kind of experience with the interior. There were some hard plastics that I would love to have seen a little upgraded, mostly just because I feel like I'm so spoiled by that Hyundai Palisade interior. But overall, I just think it's such a good car. There's so much competition in this space, but I just feel like the Santa Fe, I think they really did a really, really good job on it.
Well, do you think that feeling like, oh, there's these occasional hard plastics and stuff are a little disappointing just because the rest of it looks and feels so premium
Sure.
that you forget that you're in a car that isn't,
exactly.
that premium level?
Well, absolutely. I mean, we're very spoiled. And I also tend to not love black.
We are definitely spoiled.
Yes.
And I tend to not love black interiors also.
Yeah, me either.
I like more contrast. I want something warmer. So, if it's like a black on black on black, and then it has that, the tasteful touches of bright chrome, as they call it, that just doesn't really warm me up very much. But otherwise, it looked really nice. It just, and again, it's one of those, you don't feel like you're fighting with your car all the time. I just want to turn the radio on,
It's really hard to compete with Hyundai in any segment that they're in because they're just. We could talk about driving dynamics and stuff like that, but just in terms of average car buyer and overall value, they're just really good.
They are,
and they're.
I remember,
they're really,
and the base Santa Fe starts at 27,000 delivered.
Right. I mean, come on.
Yeah, that's amazing. I remember, and I don't know if this is still true, but several years ago, seeing a presentation, and the only company that Hyundai was losing market share to or losing owners to was Kia.
Yeah. Which while Hyundai and Kia marketing executives refuse to acknowledge that they are part of the same company, they are the same company, and they're, the hardware is all the same. There's differences in design, and some of the feature sets on given models, but they are basically the same vehicles. And if your toughest competition is yourself, you're in a pretty good place.
Well, they're also very good at taking the same set of hardware and making it different character-wise for their different brands.
Yeah, they are. That is very true.
But don't forget, in the U.S., they are incorporated separately, and so they are technically competitors. It's only back in Korea.
Well,
it all starts with the same tree.
The marketing companies, and this is true, as well for most of the foreign brands, is that they actually have multiple companies that are wholly owned subsidiaries, multiple business units, that they have, and this is true for Honda, it's true for Toyota and Hyundai and Kia and Nissan. The way the companies are structured, they have the marketing and sales business. They have an engineering business. So for Hyundai and Kia, it's the Hyundai America Technical Center here in Ann Arbor. They have their manufacturing business unit, which is a completely separate business unit, which builds vehicles for both brands. So it's kind of a weird corporate structure, but ultimately they all feed back up into Hyundai Motor Group, along with Genesis as well. They all feed into Hyundai Motor Group, which is the company at the top of the food chain.
But there was executives on both Hyundai and Kia wanted to make it clear to me that they are because they're incorporated separately in the U.S. specifically. So I think this is a U.S. and Canada issue because
and the same is true in Europe
regulatory
as well,
standards that they can't collaborate, they can't do anything. They have to treat themselves as full competitors, and they actually don't know the specifications of the vehicles that are coming out. So like Kia didn't know that Hyundai was getting the electric third row seat, things like that, because they're not allowed to communicate with each other on things like that in the States.
Except who knows all of that stuff? the guys at the tech
I
center
know.
that do engineering for both brands. So
Yes,
for all three
but as you
brands,
say,
actually,
from
for Genesis
marketing
as well.
and sales and
Yeah.
product planning, that are based in the U.S.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, marketing and sales, they don't ever talk to the tech guys.
Yeah, exactly. But I had a great experience with that vehicle as well.
So tell us about something you didn't have such a great experience
Yeah,
with.
I was gonna say, like, let's move on to your Rebecca, and I think the theme for the rest of our garage segment here is that Honda is very good to us, and they put us in their cars. And you had the MDX A-Spec from Acura.
I did.
Oh, it sounds like I just reviewed that for Forbes. It went up today.
So, you know what? Why don't you tell us about your experience, because my phone is ringing and I need to turn it off.
Okay, we can compare notes. I like the MDX a lot, especially in A-Spec trim. I think it looks great. It's very comfortable. This one, like you were saying, how you don't like all black interiors, this one has the solution for that with bright red leather seats with Alcantara centers. Acura does a really nice job with their A-Spec vehicles. They're just a little tidier. They're a little bit more enthusiast oriented. They feel good to drive, and they're comfortable. They're disciplined. This is all of those things. I think where I had issues with it, and it's going to be the same place where you had issues with it, was just the ergonomics and the secondary controls. You know, it's really hard to fault the way the MDX goes, turns, and stops. It has the V6 that's 300 almost 300 horsepower. The 9-speed automatic, it's efficient. It has a great snarl when you get on it. It has multiple drive modes. It's just, it's really pleasant to be in. It's a good size. It's got 3 rows. It looks better than the Pilot, which it's based on. And it's very thoughtfully designed for a family SUV user. And we even had snow with it, and it was very sure-footed. I was a little concerned because it's on those big A-Spec wheels with lots of tire. Didn't seem to really slide around much, and it was pretty well behaved. So I was impressed with that. The problem comes in when you're trying to operate it. It's an older model for Honda now, and for Acura as well. Just the architecture overall is just older. So it's got the 2 screen setup with the screen below and the screen above, and one of them is a touch screen, the other one is not, and there's a rotary multi-function controller knob, and there's some hard switches. So if you're using like a phone projection system, you can hit the smartphone button and it'll bring it up on the upper screen, and then you control it with the knob. There's a lot of steps to using this thing. And for stuff like HVAC, all of the buttons are kind of tiny touch points. The only 2 HVAC buttons that are actual hard buttons are the defrost, and I think that's because legally they must be. The rest of it is in the screen.
I don't know that. I don't think that's true.
Oh, okay. That was my assumption, is that you just have to have fast access to the defrost, because there's even a spec for how quickly the system will clear the fog off the windshield.
Because Teslas don't have hard buttons for defrost.
Yeah, but Tesla doesn't follow the rules.
That is true, but
I just figured it was so they could say, but we have.
I seem to recall other vehicles that had the defrost in the touch interface. So
yeah, that may be true. It just struck me as why would they put some of it here and then the rest of it in there? Because you don't know where to go as a user. You're not sure where the controls the controls you need are. And I think that was the biggest issue I had with it. And I spent a week with it, like you said, and you feel like you get to a point where you have sort of figured it out, but it always makes you think. So I think your learning curve on this car is going to be a long one. It's going to be something that you spend a couple of months before you're truly sort of second nature with it. And it still has a lot of steps to get to stuff. Things are buried where they should be right there at your fingertips. And so I think that goes back to the idea of cognitive load. It just makes you think too much. It makes you take your attention off of the road and look at the thing to figure out what the hell you're supposed to do. And the answer to just leave it in auto is okay. That's a half solution. There are times where you just need to have manual control over it, and it should be easy to figure out, because usually those times are when it's snowing and there's a lot of fog on the inside of the windshield, and you got to figure out how to get the heat and the AC up there, and or move the airflow around or something. Or one of the other functions, like the infotainment, the nav, it's not the easiest system to use, and that concerned me. I hope that they're doing better with that, but I'm not holding out a ton of hope, having seen newer systems in newer Hondas not be quite as refined as they should be. Not as much of an evolution, but the driving experience is pretty good. The only thing I thought it was a little weird was that there's kind of a delay in some of the things, like when you shift the transmission from park to reverse or park to drive or drive to reverse. Like there's a delay where it sits there and thinks about it, and then it engages. And you're like, is this thing broken? Like, what's going on? Did it ignore me? And then it does its thing. The seat that powers back for easy access, entry exit. There's a delay there. You turn the car on, and I started adjusting the seat up a couple of times before it then started to do its thing. And I was like, oh, okay, it's just it's slow to do that stuff. And I don't know whether that's just how they designed it, or if it's older sort of body control computers or whatever. I haven't really gotten into it, but it's a good vehicle. It's stickers. The A-Spec stickers is about 56, 57. You add some packages to it, and it can get more expensive. But it's a solid driver. I liked driving it, and that was the thing. There's the soul of a sports car in there. Was sort of my takeaway. So if you like driving, you'll like driving it. If you can figure out the rest of the controls, I think you'll come to an understanding. But
so
I've babbled enough. So enough about me, Rebecca. What about you?
So it's interesting because I compared it to that. I said that it wasn't as heavy. It was heavier than its competitors, and it's not as athletic. I felt like I was driving more of a draft horse versus a thoroughbred.
Well, let's define its competitors, though. Which are you comparing it to?
Well, when I think about, I guess I'm thinking about things like the BMW X5, the Audi Q7, the GMC, even the GMC Acadia Denali, were the three that I wrote down as vehicles that I've driven that. And again, it's a combination of drive experience and infotainment and interface experience. I think when I was talking to somebody, because Honda is very good to us, and Sam and I actually attended the Honda holiday party last week. What was kind of discouraging, I think is the best way to put it, was when I talked to one of the Acura people about my experience with the interface. Their response was, well, you were only in it for a week. And I contrasted that with that feeling that I had with the Santa Fe that we just talked about, where this vehicle, the Santa Fe, welcomed me in. It was intuitive, easy to understand, boom, boom, done. If I heard pardon from that Acura MDX voice recognition thing one more time, I was going to just scream.
Oh, see, I didn't even bother with the voice recognition.
Oh my gosh.
That's not my default sort of control
Well, I
scheme.
did because I couldn't get it to work. So I picked it up. It was not ideal. So I picked it up from JFK. It was like 11:30 at night. It's dark. It's not how you take delivery of a vehicle. I get that. But I ended up driving almost half the way home because I couldn't get the radio to work. And then once I got it on, then I couldn't figure out how to turn the volume down because I couldn't find the switch because it was dark. And so then I finally found the volume switch, which was welcome, and was able to turn it down. So then over the course of the next couple of days, I tried the voice recognition for things like navigation because it is so laborious to type it in. And oh my gosh, all I kept saying, first of all, I thought I was in Delaware. I have no idea why I thought I was in Delaware. It finally figured out that I wasn't in Delaware. And I don't know why that was the default. and then
it's always interesting to look back in the systems and see where the car may have been.
Oh, absolutely. But I mean, really, I don't know if I made because sometimes I will videotape. I probably didn't because I was driving most of the time when it was behaving like this. But, it just kept saying, pardon? Pardon? And I'm like, oh my gosh, just go here. So I found, like you, that it required so much effort to deal with that interface. The two screens was super confusing. You didn't know where to look. It's sort of, it runs that it's one of those things where, Sam hates touchscreen. I don't mind them. This has both, and neither of them are good.
Yeah, I don't mind touchscreens, and I think Sam was probably going to say the same thing. I don't mind touchscreens if they're well done. I haven't found one that's really well done.
So the thing what I like about touchscreens, and I don't want to go down that tangent, is that it's immediate. Like the feedback is immediate, as opposed to with the dial where you've got to roll and turn and push and pull. And of course, right now I'm in the Lexus LX 570, which is a whole nother issue. But to your point too, it's interesting across Acura, there are so many different systems. The NSX has something that's like at least 5 or 7 years old. And then you've got this one that's kind of in the middle because the MDX, Sam, didn't you say it was due for a redesign soon?
Yes, it's a new MDX is coming in mid 2020.
And then you've got that crazy touchpad thing that is an absolute nightmare in the RDX. And, I think they kind of need to get their act together when it comes to this infotainment, because none of them are good. And I don't know who they're getting as testers, but I haven't enjoyed any of them.
Well, it's unfortunate, the comment that you got from somebody at Honda that, that you only spent a week with it, and all of us have spent time in various Acura models over the last several years. So this is not the first time we've been exposed to this crazy dual screen configuration. And it's never been a good system. It's never been intuitive. It's never been particularly functional. Right. And I think, it's unfortunate that somebody made that comment. The good news is that there is an all new MDX coming next year. The MDX is the oldest vehicle, I think, in the Acura lineup, except maybe the ILX. But there is definitely a new MDX and also a replacement for the TLX coming next year. I was talking to John Ikeda, the head of Acura, at the party the other night, and he said those are both coming in 2020. And I expect that that they will get the new, that touchpad system that's in the RDX. And actually, I am like apparently the outlier. I actually like that system. I think it works pretty well, and it's more consistent. And it does take a little getting used to, but once you figure it out, I think it does work quite well.
I think my biggest issue with the RDX system, and they may have changed this, but there was no, I couldn't hang up the telephone. I couldn't hang up my phone. There's no button on the steering wheel to hang up your phone.
On the RDX?
On the RDX. I think they changed it because it was a 2-step motion.
Yeah, see, that's the problem that I had with the MDX, is a lot of stuff was multiple steps. And it's just like, this needs to be easy.
It does.
And I'm surprised though, like infotainment aside, which I sort of expected wasn't going to be my favorite thing, I'm surprised that you felt that it wasn't really as nimble or light on its feet as the X5 or some of those other traditional SUVs that are just way more massive. Because to me it felt sporty.
Really, that's so interesting. Yeah. I don't know, it just sort of felt heavy. And I do recall the Pilot being even worse in that regard. So it was not as heavy. Like the Pilot, I was very conscious of driving a 7-seater around. And I remember saying this on the podcast. The Pilot was it drove enormously. And I felt like, obviously with the SH or the A-Spec, all those things are going to be a little bit more athletic. I definitely appreciated the acceleration. I appreciated that the 9-speed was smoother, but I still just felt like I was in a larger, heavier, bigger vehicle. The other thing too that I ran into was that I had to put my foot so far down on the brake pedal to engage the stop start. I thought that was really bizarre.
I think that's a Honda thing, because, and we can pivot to this one next, but I'm driving the CR-V Touring this week, and that's the way they've figured out their stop start, and it may be from feedback from user clinics or something where you don't always want it, because some stop start systems can be really aggressive, and so Honda and Acura have decided, like, we're going to make that you need to be more deliberate about it.
Yeah, well, and
actually engage it.
And I forgot, because like, I don't know that I don't stand on the brake pedal all the time.
Yeah.
I sort of just do it enough to make the car stop, but I actually had to I had to think about pushing it in enough to engage the stop start, because the first time it happened I was like, "Oh, I didn't even know this car was set for stop start," because I had driven it for a couple of days.
Right.
And yeah, it's just I mean, I had two Acuras in my 20s. I love these things. I want this brand. There's so many good things about it, but it's just frustrating to not walk away and be like, wow, that was such a great vehicle. Especially, again, there's so much competition in this category.
I think for the price, it does what it does pretty well. There's not really a ton of options to add to the A-Spec. It does have that little bit more aggressive kind of look and feel. Whether or not it actually comes through in the driving dynamics,
Sure.
It sells a lot of X5Ms too.
Yeah. So mine was 56,295 as tested.
Yeah. So that's list price.
Yeah, and I had made a note about the technology package 5,000, all-wheel drive is 2,000. Obviously, if you need it, if you don't need it, those were my two recommendations on packages, and then Acura Watch, the driver assist system. I thought that was really good though. I did have a good experience with that. It was very non-intrusive, good audio, good haptic feedback. That was much more of an aid than than an intrusion.
Well, so I was confused by that because and this is, I think, just the state of the industry. Certainly the haptic feedback, you can turn it on and off, but I thought it was also supposed to do lane centering, which I don't think it does.
No, not on the Acura.
Right. So, but the symbol is the symbol.
Right.
In other cars that would do lane centering.
They all use the same icon for lane keeping assist, whether it does centering or not. Usually if it's centering, there's also usually a steering wheel icon that goes with it. So you'll get the lane icon and then a steering wheel added to it.
Yeah, and I'm not a huge fan of their haptic feedback. It's effective because it bumps the wheel. You feel this thump 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 through the steering column. It always makes me feel like I got a tie rod in that's about to come apart. And that's, I kind of skipped over this, but the last thing I guess I feel is a demerit for the MDX is just the ADAS, the dynamic cruise, and this is the same with the CR-V.
That was sub-op.
It's not good. It's again, I think it's probably older. It'll actually, so the Acura will do all the way down to a stop, and it'll do stop and go traffic, but it's just not smooth. It makes you car sick. And so I was just like, you know what, forget it. I'll just do it myself.
Yeah, well, and I've had that. I mean, I do remember distinctly I think the Toyota Highlander, and I literally did get car sick using the adaptive cruise. It was like New Jersey, stop and go, Sunday traffic, and it was a mess. But I also have recently started to hear reports that some of those adaptive cruise controls are actually causing accidents because they're not. Like, I always find I'm always afraid that they're not going to stop in time. And maybe because New York is such an aggressive driving area, but I don't think that's the case. People just zip in and out. And I feel like the car's not going to stop in time. So
yeah,
I don't use it very often.
And the thing about adaptive cruise control is it's not going to do full braking.
Yeah.
It's not going to do, they're typically limited to about 0.2 to 0.25 Gs of braking, which is, actually what you do. Most of your braking is in the range of between 0.2 and 0.3 Gs or less. And, that's what ACC is typically set up to do at most, usually no more than about 0.2 Gs. And, when somebody cuts in, it's off, it may not be capable of braking fast enough to avoid a collision. So even when you're using ACC, you do have to pay attention. You got to remember, this is an assist system. It's not a self-driving system.
But that's the problem, though.
And this is true even of a Tesla with autopilot. That's as fast as they'll stop with the ACC. And so, you have to be aware, if somebody's going to cut in, you got to be watching all the time. Somebody's going to be cutting in. And this is the problem, as you said, with all these systems, it's very easy to become complacent and not pay enough attention, when you're using these systems, because the most of the time they work fine, and then when you get one of those situations, then all of a sudden, you're in a bad place because the car didn't slow down fast enough.
Yeah, well, and they're sold as I'd be interested to see what the actual sort of the sales technique from the showroom folks is, because they may be sold as, oh yeah, it'll drive itself in traffic, which is sort of a half truth.
They should not be doing
right.
that.
And they may not. I don't want to. I would like to hear from people who may be in the automotive retail sector and sort of give us a spot check. Like, tell us what do you as training, what do you give these folks, and then do you ever like pay attention to what they're actually saying when they're trying to close a sale?
Well, do they use it on a test drive?
Yeah, I would say probably not.
Right? I mean, that would be a good place to try it out. Again, don't spend the 10 minutes and go on the planned route that the dealer gives you. You've got to get that thing on the highway. You've got to test the acceleration. You've got to test these kinds of things.
Drive it in the kinds of places where you're going to drive the car. Not where the salesperson wants you to go.
Once you get that dealer plate on the thing, just take off for a couple of hours. They're not even going to know it's gone. They're off trying to close some other sale.
And that's actually, the last several times that I've been car shopping, when I wanted to take a test drive, I gave them my driver's license. They took a photocopy of my driver's license. They put a dealer plate on there and said, go for it. And they oftentimes did not ride along. They might ask if they want, if I wanted them to come along. And if I said no, they said, okay, fine, go ahead. And so if you get the opportunity to drive without the salesperson along, absolutely do that, and then ask your questions when you come back. So that way you can focus on driving in the kinds of scenarios that you drive in to the degree you can, in a half hour or so, and, really evaluate it the way you would use the vehicle.
And if you use up all the fuel in it, please put some in it. Don't be a jerk. I'm sure there's a whole other side of horror stories from dealership retail that we can get into.
Oh, yes.
I'll just briefly touch on the CRV Touring, because man, the CRV is really, really good, and especially in Touring trim, it's nice. Infotainment still is not good. I keep grabbing the passenger side temperature knob, thinking it's a tuning knob because it only has a volume knob. So they've still got some work to do on their infotainment. And it's weird going from the MDX to the CRV because the systems are similar but different. And so again, I'm hunting and pecking for stuff that was one way in one model and is not that way in this model. But again, it makes up for it because it's really good to drive and it's a great size and it's very thoughtfully designed. And I love the low liftover height of the cargo area, and the back seat is pretty roomy. The CRV has grown over the years. It's a solid choice. I think that the top two in this segment right now are the RAV4 and the CRV. I drove the Escape and I liked it a lot better than the old Escape, but it's not. It's a third at best here. I'm disappointed because it should be better, but the CRV and the RAV4 are really, really hard to beat. They're very good.
Is the CRV getting a hybrid?
Yes, in the early part of 2020.
Okay, because I drove the RAV
first sometime in the first quarter.
I drove the RAV4 hybrid this summer, and
me too.
That was really, really good.
Yeah, I loved it, and I was like, "Oh man, this is a hybrid.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to hate it. I'm a car person." But no, it was. And I drove the XSE, so it's the sportier version of the RAV4 hybrid, and it was really good.
They did a nice job with that for sure.
Yeah. There's a lot of iron to talk about this week,
to say the least.
Yeah, first thing on the list sort of fits that to a T. The 2021 Chevrolet Suburban and Tahoe were displayed, and these portend the new Escalade, which will be coming later, which will be similar but different. But there's big changes afoot for these traditional SUVs. Finally, internet opinion was mixed. So, what do you guys think?
Well, I was at the reveal and also at a technical backgrounder they did earlier in the day at the GM Proving Grounds in Milford, and GM has rolled out their new full size pickup trucks over the last year and a half, the Chevy Silverado and GMC Sierra, and now they're finishing it up and they've done the heavy duties earlier this year, and now they're rolling out the full size utilities, which are remain the best selling full size utilities on the market. So they started with Chevrolet. Next month out in Colorado or
Vail.
Wyoming or something. Vail, in Vail. They're going to show off the new Yukon.
Well,
and
I
then
know, right?
and then at the beginning of February in Hollywood, they will be showing off the new Escalade. And these like past versions of the Suburban and Tahoe and the other utilities, these are derived from the pickup trucks, but this time they have diverged further than they have in the past. And the big change is they're finally putting an independent rear suspension system on these big SUVs, which means that the knock on the GM SUVs, full size SUVs, over the past decade, compared to the Expedition and Navigator, has been the third row seating, which was not good.
Right.
Because you still had a live axle in there, which means, when you've got a solid rear axle, because the differential is moving up and down along with the wheels as you go over bumps and stuff, you have to give it more clearance. So that means that the rear part of the floor pan has to be curved up, to go over that, to give the axle that clearance. When you go to an independent rear suspension, the differential no longer moves. You're only moving at the ends, at the wheels. And so you can have a much lower, the rear floor of the cabin can be several inches lower. So now instead of having a seat that's mounted basically right on the floor, and you sitting with your knees up, as you were in the previous generations of these vehicles, now you have a much more natural seating position in that third row. And on top of that, GM has also made them several inches longer. So they've stretched the wheelbase, stretched the overall length, and particularly in the Tahoe, that third row in the Tahoe is now actually for the first time actually really usable by adults. I climbed back there, and it was, I only sat in there for a few minutes, but it was much more comfortable to sit in, much easier to get in and out of than it ever has been in the past in a Tahoe. And then, one of the other big changes, relative to the pickup trucks, is that they've also adopted GM's new electrical architecture, what they call their digital vehicle platform, which includes new cybersecurity features, but it also includes the ability to do over-the-air software updates. And the pickup trucks will probably be getting this when they do a mid-cycle update, probably sometime 2021. But they debuted this on the Cadillac CT5 and CT4 and on the C8 Corvette, and it's this new electrical architecture is going into all of their new vehicles going forward, which as I said means you'll be able to get over-the-air software updates to almost all the systems in the car, and it also supports capabilities that weren't possible before, like being able to go electric and do other things. And at some point we will probably see an electric version of these SUVs because they're doing an electric version of the pickup truck as well. So it's going to be interesting to watch what sorts of features they bring. With the suspension in the Suburban and Tahoe, they're offering 3 different variants. There is the base coil spring and passive damper system. The mid-level retains the coil springs but adds the MR dampers, the magnetorheological dampers. So these are the active dampers that the fluid in the dampers actually has magnetic particles in it. So, and they use a magnet on either end of the damper. When you energize that, it aligns those magnetic particles and changes the viscosity of the fluid. So you can go from a nice, soft, plush ride to, really tight, controlled ride for better handling. And it can do it instantaneously. And then the top end has a 4-corner air spring setup with the MR dampers. And we had a chance at Milford to go for a ride. We didn't get to drive, but we went for a ride around the ride and handling course at Milford, back to back against the Navigator, or against the Expedition. So we went in the Expedition with its adaptive damper system against the Tahoe with the air springs and MR dampers. and the difference in ride quality and handling capability between the two was pretty dramatic. The control, the body control in the Tahoe was so much better. The road, the track we were on, has a lot of varying road surfaces. They use it for evaluating the ride quality and the handling of the vehicles. So you've got things like going over railroad tracks, different kinds of bumps and potholes. And in the Expedition, over various surfaces, you could feel your head, bouncing, shaking back and forth as the whole body of the vehicle was moving around. And the Tahoe was so much better controlled, it was so much smoother. And, we did one lap in the Expedition, then a lap in the Tahoe at the same speed, and then a second lap at 20 miles per hour faster.
Wow.
And this thing is, at least from a driving dynamics standpoint, looks set to be the class of the field in big SUVs.
Wow. So when you say it's on the fly, is there like a knob, or like, can you just change it?
No, it's
how does that work?
It's all automatically controlled. So there's sensors, there's accelerometers on the suspension,
Okay.
that measure the body motions and measure the wheel motions. And it will, and based on your speed and steering angle and using the accelerometers that measure longitudinal and lateral and vertical motion, it will automatically adjust those dampers on the fly as you go. And this is not new technology. This was actually invented at GM back in the late 1980s. It was actually first used in production by Ferrari in the late 90s.
Wow.
And since then it's been used on a number of other brands, and it's been used on a lot of GM vehicles. A lot of Cadillacs have it. A lot of, the Corvette has had it for a long time. They've had it on Camaros and other GM vehicles. So it's quite widely used. GM actually, it was invented at Delco when it was part of GM, and then it was sold off when Delphi was divesting a bunch of businesses in the late 90s and early 2000s after it was spun off from GM. So it's an independent. It's actually owned by a Chinese company now, but it's really good technology.
I was thinking the same thing.
It's owned by BWI, Beijing West Industries. But it works.
Well, I'm looking forward to this because I have to say that I've had really pretty positive experiences in this vehicle, in this whole platform of vehicles. And, it was funny, back in October, a friend of mine who is about my same size, and she's got 2 or 3 kids, and I saw her getting out of this giant Chevy Suburban. I'm like, what are you doing in that thing? And she said, I know. She goes, but I absolutely love it. She goes, I hated it when I first got it. I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And she goes, now I absolutely love it. And, she said it tows what they need to tow. The kids can pile in and out of it. It can take abuse. I mean, she just loves it. And I'm really glad to hear that third row is now going to be more usable as well. So I'm going on that GMC event in January, I think it is. And so that'll be an interesting thing to see if it's comparable, because I wasn't able to attend the Chevy one. But they haven't had the drive though yet, right? It was just the reveal.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they just did a ride along, so we got to ride shotgun in the Tahoe, but we didn't get to drive.
From a business standpoint, I'm sorry. These vehicles are so critical to GM from a business standpoint because they make a lot of money on them, and there's really not a lot of them, available anymore. So I'm glad to see that they're going head to head with something like the Expedition, because that's a very viable candidate as a direct competitor.
Well, what I was surprised to see during the presentation was that, the GM trucks, are about 55% market share combined between the Chevy, the GMC, and the Cadillac. They're about 55% of the market for full-size SUVs. The Expedition and Navigator are second, combined, they're about 30%. But what really surprised me was the Nissan Armada is 9% of that market segment. I was surprised that they sell that many.
I like the Armada. I mean, I like the QX80 better, but that's funny that they sell that much. Although when you start to look at it, right, the Armada, I bet, is really price competitive. compared to
For sure.
the Tahoe or the Expedition or the Suburban.
Well, and a
so
lot of it
there's
is
that.
towing as well. Like the capabilities.
Yeah. That's true. I'm I'm concerned because I don't know that I have the best barometer for evaluating these trucks and SUVs, because I really liked that GMC Sierra that I was in a few weeks ago, and it took an absolute shellacking from Car and Driver when they did a test of the three sort of full size pickups, or the maybe it's more than three. Maybe they had the Tundra in there as well, but it did not finish well. They said it just didn't feel up to the task that the Ford and the Ram did. The Ram certainly has a nicer interior. It's a lot heavier, slower, but it just felt better finished, and the driving dynamics were better. So that makes me concerned that I'm going to be impressed with something that's not actually market competitive. And
No.
they did the interiors over on these, and they look good.
It's a much nicer than any previous generation GM trucks.
Yeah, I like the GMC Sierra a lot, and I love that multi-gate tailgate thing, multi-pro tailgate. I liked that Sierra. I was on the launch, and I thought it was fantastic. I spent all day in it and really, really enjoyed it. And I thought, and I thought the driving dynamics were good on it. Again, it drove smaller than it looks. I felt like that, it felt athletic. I mean, I haven't driven the F-150. I've got the Ram 1500 right now, which is, I mean, it's just a lot of fun. It's such a beast.
Isn't that a lovely interior?
Oh my gosh.
Oh, that cabin is so nice.
The interior it's gorgeous. Yes. And my brother Larry, who is taller than my brother Steve, he's driving it over Christmas break, and he loves it. He said he's having a hard time finding parking spaces for it, and I told him that was even the short bed.
Yep.
But no, I think that, Dan, I think sometimes that there's almost a bias still against GM, but it's hard to compete with them in this platform. I feel like they just do such good product.
Yeah, I like what they've done with their trucks. And so if that sort of provides the path forward for the SUVs, they're gonna be quiet, they're gonna be comfortable. They seem to have a lower seating position, so they feel a little bit more car-like. You feel a little bit more nestled in it than just sitting on it, which is kind of nice from a driver perspective. You sort of feel like there's a touch of Camaro there, in the big trucks. It's just like the way it drives. It feels like you're enveloped in it, which I liked. So yeah, we'll see that they're sort of the moneymaker for GM to a large degree. So they have to be good, and from what I've seen, they are.
Yeah,
so,
there's a nice athletic feel to them, I think.
And I mean, GM has openly acknowledged that they need to sell a ton of these trucks and SUVs over the next several years to finance all the stuff they're doing in electrification and automation. I mean, there's many billions of dollars of investment going into that side of the business, and it's investment in products that probably isn't going to be very profitable for the foreseeable future. And so, they need these products, to keep the business afloat, because unlike a certain Palo Alto based company, they can't just go out and sell more stock, every time they need to replenish the cash flow.
Yeah, that kind of stock pumping scheme stopped a long time ago for GM.
Yeah.
And then the Escalade's going to come out. When does that come out? Like March?
February 4th is the reveal. And it's going to be, right before the Oscars, so they're going to show it to us, on that Tuesday night in Beverly Hills. And then, that following Sunday when the Oscars are on, they'll be using it to, shuttle the beautiful people around, to the red carpet.
So let's talk about Cadillac. That seems like a mistake, because that's not who that just seems dumb. I mean, I guess it gets the Escalade on TV, which is fine, but man.
Well, the Escalade in particular, is a vehicle that is very popular with wealthy people. They like it because it's big and roomy, and it's got lots of creature comforts. It's popular for, black car services. It's popular, among basketball players and people in the entertainment industry. As an alternative, to in the past where they might have been, driven around in stretch limos.
Which
now,
are disgusting. God, stretch limos are the worst.
Now, you get into the long wheelbase Escalade, and it's, the same kind of thing, but, it's, it's something that, unlike those vehicles those limos that were often hacked together and, usually not very good, it's a much more solid vehicle.
Okay. Yeah, I'll buy that. Or Cadillac. They don't. So you went to the business update lunch with Steve Carlisle and their new CMO, and so you learned a few things, Sam, about what Cadillac is going to be doing. The one that stuck out to me was like now that they've gone all alphanumeric, they're gonna spend the next 5 years going back to names.
Yeah.
And
so
they're are they going to use legacy names, or are they going to use?
They haven't said exactly what the names are going to be, but they are going to as they launch their electric vehicles in the next couple of years. They are going back to real names. So I mean, the Escalade, has always been the one exception that never went to an alphanumeric name. It always kept its name. And they haven't said what the names are going to be, but starting with the launch of their electric crossover, everything following that is going back to some sort of name that is more than just XT or CT and some digit.
Please, for the love of God, use like the old names, not because
Fleetwood and
not
Seville
because I'm like some
DeVille.
sort of nostalgic person, but those names exist already. Like, they're out there. You will spend less to reestablish them. Right, exactly. Truck DeVille or whatever. I don't know what you're gonna call it, but like, please, for crying out loud, don't try to come up with some name that sounds like a prescription medication and then like you've got to establish it. You're gonna just waste time and money. Please make a Fleetwood. Like, wouldn't the CT6 be a great Fleetwood?
Yeah, I think so. Except the CT6 is going away.
I know it's going away. Okay, so the XTS. Oh, that's also going away. What are they left with? The XT6,
CT5 and CT4.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're going to get another bigger sedan to replace the CT6.
Well, they could just call it the 60 Special when it shows up.
But speaking of the CT5, they finally started deliveries of that car to dealers in the last couple of weeks. So that's showing up in dealerships now. So now
that's the hatchback, right? Or
it's a sedan.
The sedan.
It's a replacement for the CTS.
Okay, so it's just because there's the CT4 that's a little smaller, right? And that sort of bridges the gap between ATS, CTS. Like, it's a little bigger than the ATS, a little smaller.
The CT4 is actually almost exactly the same size as the ATS.
I am so confused by their lineup.
Well, hence the change to names.
Yeah. So the CT4 and CT5, and then you've got the XT4, XT5, XT6, and Escalade for the utilities. So the CT4 is in dealerships now. The CT5 is in dealerships now. The CT4 will be in dealerships in the next couple of months. And the XT6 is already on sale, has been on sale for several months now. They apparently sold about 4,300 of them in the third quarter. One of the big bits of news, from Steve was that starting with the CT5, with each new model that's introduced, a few months after the launch of the base models, they will be adding Super Cruise on everything, as an option for everything.
Which they should have done like 2 years ago.
Yes.
Well, the reason they didn't do it before was because they didn't have the new electrical architecture ready. When they did the CT6, they had to make a lot of modifications to that car to the electrical system in order to accommodate Super Cruise. And it wasn't real, they couldn't really do things like over-the-air updates to keep it up to date. So with this new electrical architecture that I mentioned, that's on the Tahoe, it's also on the CT5 and 4 and everything else going forward. they will have the ability to do those updates on a regular basis, and add new features to it. So now that they have that in there, it's a lot easier to integrate Super Cruise, and they will be adding things like auto lane change capability and more, the ability to operate on more roads, expanding the maps, and various other features that are needed for that system. And so that that'll come out probably in the spring for the CT5, sometime in midsummer for CT4. It'll be on the Escalade, by the end of the year. The Escalade's going to launch mid-year. By the end of the year, it'll have Super Cruise available. And they actually released a teaser earlier this week for the Escalade. That it was a shot. It was a GIF of the interior, the instrument or the steering wheel and the instrument panel. And you could see the Super Cruise light bar on the steering wheel, but they also had this massive 38-inch OLED display behind, for this this one big display. It's not clear if it's actually one or if it's two pieces, but it's 38 inches of OLED display for the center stack and the instrument cluster.
Well, is that the one that's curved too? Like, didn't they?
Yeah, it's a curved display, so presumably curved towards the driver, so you can actually reach it.
I think that actually, like, I'm glad that it's organic LEDs, so that they can actually get like true black out of it. Like the pixels, the little elements light up instead of having a backlight, which I think is right. If you're going to do screens, that's the way to do screens, so that there's not as much light pollution in the cabin. And then being able to curve it and stretch it like that, I think that actually has a lot of really good automotive applications. Allows them to sort of fit things into the space available better than dealing with flat screens. So that'll be interesting. We'll see how much I hate that.
So, Sam, I don't mean to backtrack a little bit, but I do have a question. Did they say when they were going to start transitioning names?
So that first EV, the one they showed the rendering of last January at the Detroit Auto Show, that's coming in 2022. So that'll be the first model that has. So we're still 2 years away from that.
Okay.
Before they start introducing names, and that'll be actually that. There will be a Cadillac electric crossover actually launching in China in 2021, but that will be it'll be on the same platform, but it'll be a different body, different vehicle from the one that we get. Okay. So we get one in 22. There will be one launching in China in 21, around the same time that the electric pickup truck launches here. So in the second half of 21. So it's not clear which one is going to launch first. But then the Cadillac will launch in the first part of 22, and that'll be the first one that actually gets a name, and then everything after that. And one of the comments from Carlisle was that as we enter the 2020s as an ICE brand, internal combustion engine brand, the brand will exit as a battery electric vehicle brand. And he called the 2020s the end of the ice age for Cadillac. And so expects that by 2030, most, if not all, Cadillacs will be electric.
All right.
Okay.
And another comment he had as well was about he said that 300-mile range for an EV is table stakes. In the EV market
for
now.
sure.
I don't disagree.
And Cadillac was actually aiming for 400 miles for all their vehicles.
Wow.
So what we won't see when Cadillac finally launches their EVs is we won't see anything like the Audi e-tron or the Porsche Taycan, or the Jaguar I-Pace coming to market with like 200 miles of range when Tesla is selling cars with 300 to 370 miles of range.
Well, I don't know. Let's talk about classic GM product rollout. Which we're still seeing. Like, why don't we have Super Cruise on stuff? Oh yeah, we couldn't actually do that on most of the cars we're going to try to sell you. That's going to be on one very specific model that's going to be expensive that nobody's going to buy. Like, that's just classic GM thing. All the way back, like for decades, they've been like, yes, this is going to be the best one. It's going to have all of these features. It's going to have the what is it, the Z51 suspension or whatever, and like they do this thing where they'll introduce a model and then they'll get some of them, like look at the base models or the base and mid-level ones out as soon as they can, and then You wait a year for the really good one that they really want you to drive, but then all of your impressions have been made on the one that you could drive, not the one they want you to drive, and it sinks the model. Like, so I hope that that's not what they do. As they roll out electric vehicles, we're like, yes, so the base model gets 250 miles of range, but if you spend enough to get the big battery, you get 400. Like,
yeah, my guess is that when they start rolling these Cadillacs out, the base models are going to be 300 miles, and then 400 miles is the option. So I think that they have seen the challenges that that brands like Audi and Porsche and Jaguar have had this past year, and they've decided they don't want to be in that position, especially since they're not launching until 2022. It would be crazy for them to launch something at that stage, that has such a short range.
Yeah, I mean, you can be late to the party, but you got to have the best dress on then.
Well, that's a good one. But you're never going to change perception. This is the problem that Audi is having now. It's like, okay, fine, it's rated at 201 miles. How many more do you need? It doesn't matter that people really only need like 40 miles a day.
It's not. Yeah, it's not about the reality. As we know, car buyers are not rational. They don't make decisions. They don't make purchase decisions based on rational criteria.
Said with
they
love.
base it on what they think they're going to need. And when it comes to EVs, they want 300 miles of range. They want to have the same kind of range they get out of their gas car.
Which, that's not terribly unreasonable, especially when you consider the amount that they cost. It's like, well, why can't it do what that thing just did? And I realize there's lots of answers for it, but at the end of the day, they're the ones that spend the money. So,
yep.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. So Cadillac, I hope they make it. I hope they pick good names, please. Next thing on the list is the Mazda CX-30, which is interesting because it slots in between the CX-5 and the CX-3, right? It's like right in there. It's a little bigger than the CX-3, a little smaller than the CX-5.
It's a Goldilocks.
Sort of it's kind of like
just the right size.
Yeah. So, what's the story with this thing? Fill me in.
You want to go first, Rebecca?
Yeah, sure. So I really liked this vehicle. I mean, it slots in between the two. So it's a little bit bigger than the CX-3. It's a little bit smaller than the CX-5. I think, speaking of names, I think the naming convention may be a little confusing for consumers. But overall, I drove it last week, 2 weeks ago now in Southern California, and it was a lot of fun to drive. It's sporty and fun and, kind of does those things well. It was very comfortable over, several hours. And my passenger actually made a point of commenting on how comfortable it was, a fellow journalist. And, I think that it's good that it is bigger than the CX-3 for this US market. I don't know. I feel like it might be a little small for some people. Like, I guess, I don't know. I feel like that CX-5 is such a good size that I don't know why this is completely necessary. I mean, price point is $28,200 as tested, which was the premium. It starts at $21,300. It's got a 2.5 liter 4-cylinder, 186 horsepower. So, it did a lot of things really well. I mean, it's a direct competitor to that CR-V and RAV4 that we talked about earlier. And you can certainly see the attention to detail and the interior. It was very, very nice. It's got some nice more luxurious features like a heads-up display, a power rear liftgate standard in the fully loaded premium. So it does a lot of those things really well. It does not have a touch screen.
It has that controller thing that's on the console, right?
Yes.
Which you hate.
I didn't love that.
Yeah. Okay.
I thought it was fantastic.
Of course you did. But, again, I think it's a really, really good vehicle. Actually, in my review, I have a little chart to understand like where it slots in between the CX-3 and CX-5. But Sam, you had mentioned, I think that you thought that the CX-3 might go away.
My guess is that a year from now, the CX-3, for now, the CX-3 remains on sale in the U.S., but it's never been a huge seller in this market. When I was at the LA Auto Show, I had a chance to sit down with the program manager for these vehicles, and they explained that when they developed the CX-3, it launched back in 2015. When they were developing it, the main vehicle in that segment of small crossovers was the Nissan Juke. And so they used the Mazda 2 as the base platform for the CX-3. And for the U.S. market in particular, it sells reasonably well in Japan and in Europe, but for the U.S. market in particular, it turned out to be too small. They weren't quite sure where the market for these subcompact utilities was going to go at that time, and so they used what they had at that time, and here it sells about 14,000 units a year, which is pretty minimal compared to a lot of the smaller utilities, like the Honda HR-V and Jeep Renegade and even the Ford EcoSport. And because of its size, the CX-3 drives well. It's got good driving dynamics, but it's got some it's got a very cramped back seat, and it's got some less than ideal ergonomics in the front. Like, for example, the cup holder, in the center console is below the center armrest. So you actually have to fold up the center armrest to access the cup holder, which is not great.
Right.
So, I would guess that, and with the CX-30, they opted to develop it from the Mazda 3 platform, the new Mazda 3 platform, and they developed it concurrently with the new 3. So there's a lot of stuff that they were able to do, incorporate into that architecture design, from the beginning, so there's fewer modifications required to that, to make the CX-30 out of that vehicle. And, I think it's a much better size, particularly for the U.S. market, but generally, everywhere. I think it's a more reasonable size. It's fairly compact on the outside. It's basically the same size as an HR-V or, some of the other top vehicles in the segment. But I think, when you compare it to anything else in that segment, the interior is so much better. It's such a much nicer place to spend time.
For sure.
Than anything else in that segment. And, it drives really well. It's got the typical really good Mazda driving dynamics. It also, the only engine available in North America is that 2.5 liter with 186 horsepower, which makes it the most powerful vehicle in the segment by a pretty good margin. The HR-V, for, as nice as it is in a lot of ways, the powertrain in the HR-V really lets it down. The combination of that older 1.8 liter, 140 horsepower and the CVT, it just doesn't really cut it in that vehicle. And most of the other competitors in that segment are in that 135 to 145 or so horsepower range. So this is significantly more powerful than the competitors. It's got a decent amount of room inside. The front's great. The rear is fine for a couple of adults. You've got enough cargo space in the back that, you can put 4 carry-on bags in there. If you stand them up on their sides, you can put 4 in there. We've talked in the past, at times, particularly with the CX-5, about, the value proposition with Mazdas, as they've tried to go more premium. This one, that's not an issue at all, I think, for this car.
I would agree.
It starts at 21.3, and especially compared to what I'm driving right now, I have the Mitsubishi Outlander Sport right now, which we'll talk about next time. But the Outlander Sport GT that I'm driving, with the 2.4 liter, it's like $28,500, and with the feature set that it has on it, the comparable CX-30, and this is a pretty much loaded Outlander. The comparable CX-30 would be the mid-level trim, the CX-30 Select. It's like $2,000 cheaper than that Mitsubishi, and
it's like 20 years newer.
That CX-30 is such a much nicer car to drive than the Mitsubishi.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just no contest at all. So, I think that, you and I drove on subsequent days. I drove on the first wave, Rebecca. You drove the second day. So I drove from Palm Springs to San Diego. You drove from San Diego back the other way. And those roads that we drove on, going through the mountains from Palm Springs to San Diego, I mean, that's some twisting mountain roads. And, this thing's got really great steering feel.
No body roll.
Great ride quality.
Yep.
Yeah. Good body control. It's a fun little car to drive. The only issue I would take with it, from a design perspective, I like the overall shape of the body. I think the cladding on the wheel arches is a little too thick.
Oh yeah,
you
had mentioned that. I thought that was a really interesting visual.
To me,
sure.
To me, it seemed to overemphasize, and particularly, with the gap to the wheels, I think it, kind of maybe overemphasized that a little bit. I personally would make that a little slimmer, but that's a matter of personal taste. I think overall the Mazda design team has done a great job. So I think it's a excellent little crossover.
I agree, and I like the price point a lot because I have at times given Mazda a really hard time, particularly about that CX-5. I agree, and just looking at some stats, so just to give people an idea. So the CX-3 has a cargo volume of about just over 12 cubic feet. That's with the second row in place. And the CX-30 is 20 cubic square feet. The CX-5 is 30 cubic square feet. So it really does give you a really nice amount of room. And even though it's about 2 inches wider than the CX-3, but it's about 5 inches longer, and the wheelbase is about 3 inches longer. And so that's also going to give you a more stable, solid feel, because you're right, Sam, those twisty roads, I remember being really comfortable in them. And as I said, my driving partner, Alan Taylor, he was remarking on
Alan
Taylor, I know, right? And he was, remarking how, every piece of his perfect hair stayed in place. So it was...
Alan's so good on the radio, though. I like Alan.
I love him. It was a privilege to drive with him. So, and again, it's that feeling of like when you get out of the car, do you feel refreshed? Do you feel like this car was easy to be in, easy to drive with? All those things I thought were really a really, really positive experience. And especially, I remember driving the HR-V a while ago now, and it's sort of, you always have that feeling that you're in a subcompact car, right? You don't have that feeling of being in a premium vehicle. Whereas I think in the Mazda, the CX-30, I really felt like I was in a premium vehicle.
Yeah, the HR-V is, I think that's getting old now too. So
yeah, I actually haven't driven an HR-V since it first launched, like 4 years ago now.
Yeah, something like that. Same here. It's been a while.
I think I drove it 2 years ago, maybe. It could have even been 3 years ago. It's been a while.
So I think you're right. You're probably right. CX-30 is the death knell for the CX-3, which is probably fine.
Yeah, at least in the North American market, I think that they'll keep the CX-3 overseas, but I think here, it's at the point where it just doesn't make sense anymore.
I think that probably wraps us up. We've put a solid, meaty podcast together here. So thanks for listening. You know where to find us. We are at WheelBearingsCast on Twitter. You can send us an email, feedback@wheelbearings.media, and we'll catch everybody next time.
Bye.